He wasn't breaking the law. He wasn't causing a scene. He was simply standing in front of his own home when strangers in dark vests marched up the driveway. They claimed authority. They claimed power. But what they really carried was something far more dangerous: prejudice. In that moment, one black man became the target of a staged arrest in his own neighborhood, surrounded by people who were ready to look the other way. But what they didn't know was that the man they tried to corner wasn't just another resident. He was someone they should have feared from the start, because when masks of authority slip, the truth comes crashing down. And this truth, it would shake the entire block. But how did a Saturday morning chore turn into a neighborhood standoff no one would forget? Reginald Carter lived the kind of life most neighbors barely noticed. A quiet man in his 40s, he kept his lawn trimmed, waved politely at passers-by, and carried himself with the calm assurance of someone who had seen more of the world than he let on. To those around him, he was just another homeowner on a suburban street lined with two-story houses and mailboxes that looked nearly identical. He valued peace, routine, and the simple rhythm of mornings that began with coffee on the porch and ended with the sound of kids playing down the block. But beneath that calm exterior was a man shaped by years of discipline, a man who had faced dangers his neighbors couldn't imagine. They never knew, and he never told them, because to him, home was the one place where he didn't need to be on guard. That Saturday morning started like any other. Reginald grabbed the trash bag, stepped out into the sunlight, and thought only about getting it to the curb. He didn't see the eyes watching from across the street. He didn't notice the shadows waiting at the edge of his driveway. Not yet, because the moment he set that bag down, his quiet life collided with a scheme that wasn't about neighborhood rules at all. It was about power, prejudice, and control. But what Reginald didn't know was that the people standing in his driveway weren't there to talk. They were there to take him. Reginald straightened his back as he noticed them stepping onto his driveway, 2 HOA board members and a man he didn't recognize. Their polished smiles didn't match the sharpness in their eyes. One of them, Mrs. Whitmore, clutched a clipboard like it was a badge of authority. "Mr. Carter," she said, voice dripping with false courtesy, "we need to discuss some violations." Reginald frowned. Violations? He kept his property immaculate. The grass was cut, the shutters freshly painted. He knew the rules better than anyone, because he'd been fined before, for things no one else in the neighborhood ever seemed to get fined for. A trash bin left out for an extra hour, a holiday wreath too large for the door. Things his white neighbors did all the time without consequence. He forced a calm tone. "What violations?" That's when the stranger spoke up. He wasn't HOA, he was a contractor, and according to them, Reginald's fence was non-compliant. But what chilled him wasn't the excuse. It was the way the man looked at him, like he didn't belong here, like he was trespassing on his own property. Reginald's chest tightened. He'd seen this look before, back when he wore a uniform, overseas, back when he had to be on guard every second. And now, here it was again, right outside his own front door. He tried to reason with them. "That fence was approved when I bought the house. It's in the records. I've got the paperwork." But they cut him off. "Doesn't matter," Mrs. Whitmore said coldly. "We've already issued a removal order. If you refuse, we'll fine you daily until you comply." It wasn't about the fence. It was about control, about pushing him, about reminding him he was different. The contractor smirked. Or, of course, you could just sell. This neighborhood's changing anyway. Reginald felt heat rise in his chest. He wanted to shout, to fight, but years of discipline told him to stand tall and measured. He could hear his late father's words echoing. They'll try to make you lose yourself, son. Don't give them the satisfaction. But then came the final blow. Mrs. Whitmore leaned in, her voice low but sharp. Truth is, Mr. Carter, some of the board think your presence isn't a good fit here. If you don't like how we do things, maybe it's time you found somewhere else. The words sliced through him. Presence. Not the fence. Not the rules. Him. His skin. His existence. He stared at them, jaw tight, refusing to give them the reaction they wanted. But inside, anger burned like fire under ice. And as they walked away, clipboards clutched and smirks intact, Reginald knew this wasn't over. They weren't just trying to fine him, they were trying to erase him. The question wasn't if they'd come back, the question was how far they'd go next. And Reginald had no idea that their next move would turn his quiet life into a battlefield. The shouting grew louder. "Get down, now!" The words cut through the night like a blade. His knees buckled, not from guilt but from the weight of fear pressing on his chest. He dropped to the pavement, palms open, gravel digging into his skin. The crowd around him gasped. Phones hovered in the air, recording every second, yet somehow he felt utterly alone. The officer's shadow loomed closer, hand trembling near his weapon. His heart slammed against his ribs. What do I say? What do I do? He had nothing on him. No weapon, no threat. Just his skin, the very thing that marked him guilty in their eyes. A voice from the crowd broke through. "He didn't do anything. Leave him alone." For a moment, hope flickered. Maybe the truth would finally matter. Maybe someone would step in. But the officer's boot pressed against his back, pinning him to the ground. Every breath came shorter, tighter, as panic clawed at his throat. He remembered the headlines, the names, the faces of others who had been here before him and never made it home. "Stop resisting!" the officer barked, though he hadn't moved an inch. His silence was his only defense, but even silence was being twisted into threat. Tears burned at the corners of his eyes, not from weakness, but from rage. Rage that his humanity had been stripped down to a stereotype. Rage that his life, his dreams, his family, could all be erased in an instant. Then, just as the officer's hand began to draw the weapon from his holster, the night erupted with a scream. Not his, not the officer's, someone else's. A sound, sharp enough to freeze everyone in place, and in that frozen moment between life and death, justice and tragedy, he realized this was the breaking point. The night would not end the same way it began. Would this be the moment that destroyed him? Or the moment the truth finally broke through? He made it through that night, but the scars were deeper than anyone could see. The shouting, the looks, the humiliation, it all replayed in his mind like a film on a loop. He hadn't done anything wrong, yet he was treated as if his very existence was a crime. And that's the weight he carried long after the streetlights dimmed and the crowd dispersed. But this wasn't just about one man, one night, or one street. This was about a system, about generations who had walked the same path and faced the same fear. What happened to him is a reflection of what continues to happen, quietly, violently, endlessly, in towns and cities across the world. And while the moment passed, the memory became a wound that didn't heal, a reminder that safety and dignity aren't equally shared. For him, the impact was clear: trust shattered, innocence stolen, and a truth that could never be unseen. For us, the impact should be even clearer. Every story like his is not just an isolated incident. It's a call, a warning, a demand for change. Because how many more lives have to be interrupted, silenced, or broken before we admit the truth? How many more names will echo through protests? How many more headlines will scream injustice before the world finally says, enough? This story doesn't end with him. It lives in the choices we make, the silence we keep, or the voices we raise. And so the question lingers, heavy and unshakable. If we don't face racism head-on, then when the next story unfolds, will we be bystanders again? Or will we finally be part of the change?